Hi, everybody. I am here to teach you about a thing that I learned about architecture. We're going to journey into the heart of architecture. You're probably going to say, hey, that sounds like nothing. Is engineering nothing? I think JavaScript is ready for engineering. Is JavaScript ready? Are you ready for engineering? Are you ready for architecture? Castles, bridges, architecture. Hammers, anvils, craftsmanship. Cloud-engineering, cloudsmanship, clouditecture. These are all things. I know this isn't a confessional. I actually don't know what any of those things I just said were. So if anybody wants to provide some definitions for me after the talk. I'm a cloud engineer at the front side in Austin, Texas. You'll see I'm highly credentialed. 3 years Jazz, 2 years TAP. My wife came up with a few of these. She says I'm a donut master, which is totally legit. I actually am not here to talk about architecture because I don't really know about it. I think the universe actually does have one Uncle Bob Martin, and I think he'd agree that's plenty. We don't live in an ivory tower. I've never really had much use for ivory tower architecture, but that's maybe because, I've only been programming for a few years. We don't live in the ivory tower. We live in someplace else. And I want to talk to you about the ball of mud architecture pattern. If any of you have heard of it, Brian Foote came up with this in the late 70s with Brian Merrick. It's a pretty great website. I'm going to point you to it, and I hope that you all go read it because it will just, if you've been coding for more than a year, it will bang you like a gong. To do that, I need to talk about city planning. You guys recognize this city? Probably not. It's a little quaint hamlet in the Midwest called Salt Lake City. Most cities aren't designed for growth, and Salt Lake City would actually be a rare exception. And you'll see that it actually handled its eventual growth quite well. From layout to infrastructure, it doesn't have many of the problems that seem to plague larger cities. But most of our programs don't actually work like this. We dream that they will, but they don't. My current hometown of Austin is a lot more typical. The city layout and infrastructure were unprepared for that kind of growth. They start small and gradually grow larger, and this results in the dreaded urban sprawl. That's Mopac. Looks like around maybe 30th Street. And that's the traffic I sit in every day, so that actually gives me a little bit of shell shock. Let's not look at that much longer. Even that, though, is much too good for most of the code that we inherit. We live here. Our code often doesn't live in that nice planned city or even a sprawling metroplex. In code, we live in a favela. This is a favela. It's a Brazilian slum. Looks really kind of cool. It's like the definition of a walkable city. But let's zoom in a little bit. It's a Brazilian shanty town, kind of turned into a permanent settlement. How did that happen? Well, people with little skill can create houses. That's great. Anybody can do it. So you walk in and you build whatever structure you want with whatever you can find. So they pop up everywhere. The problem is these structures are difficult to maintain, to grow, or protect. They have very little fire or police presence, and safety and crime issues are everywhere. So forget about architecture. I'm going to hand wave over the entire concept of architecture. We're going to journey into a code favela, and I'm going to take your sanity. So the favela is actually a manifestation of Brian Foote's ball of mud pattern, and we'll talk more on that in a minute. But making one is really easy. It's so easy that most of us do it a lot. You start with a piece of throwaway code, something temporary, then you add to it, and then you decide to lean on it as a part of your business. So how does that happen? If any of this sounds familiar. So this should be easy. It's got to happen this week. How many of you hate being asked to raise your hands in a talk? I should see 0 hands, people. Seriously. None of you should have raised your hands. The rest of you, how many of you have been asked to put a prototype of your own in production before? It's the best feeling, right? You're like, sleep so good. So there's this myth of a 2-week feature. I was talking to a CTO of a company that was a client of ours, and he's like, yeah, they keep asking, like, what can we do in 2 weeks? What can we do in 2 weeks? The answer is nothing. You can talk about what you want in 2 weeks, but they say, no, we want you to deliver something in 2 weeks. So those 2-week features take 6 weeks, and then we try to cram it into 2 weeks, and then we make sacrifices. Or we'll inherit code from inexperienced devs, but most of the time, our shanty towns start as a quick prototype. So let's build one, right? Like, we do this all the time, probably. It starts like any other. Let's say we work on Gryffindor. It's a social network for animated GIFs. It was founded by someone who had made a lot of money with their Harry Potter fanfic site and decided they wanted to start a site to share animated GIFs. It's just a plain vanilla server-side app. Somebody said, Rails, G, scaffold, blah, and Gryffindor magically popped into existence. Man, do we really want to talk about pronunciation of GIF? All right, here's the thing. I don't care what the guy who created it said. I'm an English major guy, so I care a lot about saying it with the soft G. I don't know, actually, yeah. So, we're going to start by sprinkling JS. DHH calls it a sprinkling, I think, of JS, which I always thought was a little weird, but it's a nice little mental thing to visualize. We're going to sprinkle some JS in. All right, your boss calls. She says that users want a better experience on the site. So they shouldn't have to go to the whole new page to submit a new GIF. They should do it right from the index page. You look at your JavaScript file. Let's see. Okay, well, undaunted, we march forward. All right, easy, right? We'll sprinkle a little HTML on the form and add show hide. All done. Great job. All right. Except submit requires a full page refresh. That's kind of irritating to users. Could you just do that with AJAX? Well, we know AJAX. That's just a little jQuery AJAX. That's what it's for. All right. Now, that's great, except now you've actually created a bug because the new post doesn't actually pop into the screen because that's static HTML generated from the server. Can you add it to the list? Oh, no problem. All right, okay, so it's a little bit of a problem. You're now duplicating DOM from your app in JS, but a little duplication never killed anybody. So you're agile, right? So you agile the code in. This is agile. We agiled it right in there until the whole thing is so agile. All right, so the sprinkle's starting to turn into a little bit more of a rain shower. So your project manager comes by and says, he's super happy, right? He says, great, users are happy, but I've got another idea for you. Users kind of want to be able to cancel that window and close it out and zero that form out. All right, this is a very small feature, so we happily oblige. We dutifully implement the cancel button and zero out the form with jQuery. All right, so now users are hitting submit, though, on empty and invalid forms. So we gotta we gotta validate this a little bit. So we're validating on the server, but we're not getting good responses back that we're handling well. Let's just prevent it on the client side. It shouldn't be too hard to tell if there's a GIF inside that post body. Okay, well, it's a little hard to tell. It wasn't easy, but it was relatively straightforward. We also need to disable the submit button unless it's valid. So now we are kind of pushing some state of this thing around. But it's fine. It's fine, everything's fine. Don't worry about it, it's fine. All right, so now your sprinkling is a little bit more of a torrential downpour. It's really kind of coming down out there. All right, so the CEO comes by, and she wants to congratulate you and ask for just a couple more enhancements. Let's add a cool inline preview for the image so users know exactly what they're posting before they click submit. And let's add a character count like Twitter so that doesn't ding them for long GIF URLs. Okay, all right. So we do the check and we add it in and we add a little we add a little character count. That breaks a couple other things. And it leads to more double checking as we start moving this state around to say, okay, zero out the form, seriously uncancel, make sure that it's zeroed out in this place, make sure that the button is enabled in this case. We're starting to build pretty awesome looking little application here. Sandy Metz, who's like one of my favorite people on the planet, talks about code shape as an indicator of code quality. This code has a shape. That shape is a sack of hot garbage. Like on the streets of Manhattan in summertime, where it's like dripping like a brown liquid. It's unidentifiable. So here we are, a total tsunami of entangled jQuery code. Excellent. All right. So please, CEO comes by. Please, just one more feature. It's really important. So I really was going to write one more feature, but there is so much double checking in this app and interwoven states, that concept of interleaving that Pete talked about initially. The thought of editing that code makes me want to physically vomit. So now what, right? Well, we have several options available to us. Addressing a ball of mud is pretty difficult, and you have a few choices. So we could sweep it under the rug and put it inside a black box and forget about it. We could tear it down and rebuild from scratch. We could do block-by-block renovation. These are all part of the ball of mud pattern and how to address it. You keep the whole thing working, but you reconstruct it block by block, or you can quit your job. So the black box is fine if you know you're never going to have to touch it again. The rewrite is super tempting, but you're going to find lots of hidden pain from features that exist and were built over time. And you always discover some kind of business logic that was just like secretly hiding in that code somewhere. And quitting's out because we're done running away from our problems. All right, so we decided refactor is best in this case. The feature has to be maintained, but it's become too difficult to manage. Users are having a bad time, and those problems actually get more intense and riskier the longer a user is clicking around on your site, because you're getting more of that state on the client side that could be out of sync with the server or even itself. So most importantly, you're tossing and turning at night. You can't stop thinking about the bug reports you're going to have in the morning that you're going to have to fight with, the frustrated users, the angry managers, and your gut is telling you to fix this, and your gut is totally right. All right, so you have two paths out of this place. One of them is to refactor toward more idiomatic JS. Actually, I was talking about this with a friend of mine in Austin, and he's like, that code, did you write that code as like a straw man argument about how bad jQuery code can be? And I was like, yes. Like, actually, I was kind of maybe doing my best with what I had at the time. So he's like, well, you could do this and this and this. So path one is you can refactor to plain JavaScript objects and make it more idiomatic. But path two is you can lean on a framework or something to refactor toward and use models to manage that data in that state. Our goal is to get the heck out of the DOM as fast as humanly possible. That's our biggest pain point, so we're going to choose a framework to help manage that for us. We'll have the framework manage the DOM, and we'll manage the data. So there are 5 steps to doing this. And so that should be easy, right? Like refactoring is just 5 steps, so we can probably just cancel the rest of the talk. Thanks, everybody. All right, we'll go into it. It's just nice to kind of build up, in my opinion, against a framework, to spending a time having something that manages that for me as a developer of no particular skill, I guess. I really like having that to lean against. The reason that we choose Ember, we've written a blog post about it. We'll probably write more. I like a lot of things about it, but for this specific case, it's a few things. It's got a model layer for managing data, bindings to represent state and tie them to the page, and components to tie them together in a way that we can drop in easily. So we'll move to step 1, wrap it. Wrap it, wrap it, wrap it, wrap it. Okay, so a lot of people think that Ember is just for starting an application from scratch. It's what all the tutorials will tell you. In reality, Ember has a pretty great component system that lets you drop Ember into an existing application without too much trouble. We've written that process up on our blog as well. It's actually really easy, so you'll actually get it from context going along here. All right, first step. This code goes to code jail. If it escapes, it will kill people. So we're going to put that terrible code in code jail and wrap it in a component, which is a self-enclosed, contained bit of DOM in JS. Code jail here is the init legacy code function. That name is not significant. I just picked it because it's actually bootstrapping the old code. So we make no changes to the actual code itself. And we move the HTML into the associated handlebars template. And no structure of the DOM or the code actually changes. It just takes it and closes it inside a component and puts it on the page. And the way that we put it on the page is just with jQuery. We instantiate the component and stuff it into the page. And that actually just works, we think. There's no way to really know if your stuff works. You just poke at it with your hands on the browser. So the next step is to test it. And we write our first test. And we just make sure that the thing shows up in the first place. And that test actually passes. You guys are going to, wait, what? Did we skip something here? The test, and then now the tests are passing. That test just does what it says it does. It asserts that the component exists and that a piece of the component exists as well. All right, so you probably saw a little magical hand waving there. I'm doing a huge hand wave over JavaScript testing setup. And I think most people in here do JavaScript, and so you've probably got a solution that either works or does not work for you based on my experience with JavaScript testing. A note on that really fast. On its own, testing JavaScript is pretty easy, but when you start adding frameworks or server-side frameworks like Rails with the asset pipeline, things can start getting a little complicated. this whole scene is kind of a Wild West. There are lots of choices for what you want to do, and it's pretty wide open. Not like wide open spaces and fresh air, but like this Wild West. And it can actually lead to a paralysis of choice, in my experience. And there's not really an accepted happy path for a lot of this stuff yet. So things are maturing, and we're building schools and hospitals still. So we're just kind of all figuring it out. There's lots of need right now for libraries, for blog posts, people finding happy paths through this. If you have questions about getting your test set up for something like we're talking about right now, the best thing to do is take me aside and talk to me for about 15 minutes. And I can help you get it set up. We'd love to blog about it and make it more obvious how we do this stuff. I'd love to get feedback from all of y'all about how you do it. We're all kind of collectively as a community figuring this stuff out. So, all right, moving back into hand wave over, we're actually back into actual tests that actually pass. And we want to actually test some stuff that relies on AJAX, and that can be intimidating. It's actually pretty simple. I like the IC AJAX from Ryan Florence and his team at Instructure. And we add tests for each path through the experience. Here we're testing that submit throws a success message. And then we add more tests for each path through the experience. And here we're testing that submit shows a success message here. I think, yes. All right, so that's the test. That's a lot of tests around this thing, but this was a tiny feature that they asked you for, and all of this is just testing the various kinds of functionality and pathways through that minuscule little component. But with that in place, we can actually move forward with some confidence with this refactor. So all right, let's take a victory lap. This is actually for Cassandra, who is a super bad A, like roller derby champ. So go ahead and take a victory lap. You earned it. This is actually just the start, though. The third step is that we need to identify models. What I mean by that is there are things that you rely on in your client side that are persistent, that have state, and your server-side MVC might give you some first clues toward this. It probably won't wind up matching exactly what you wind up with, but it's actually a pretty good place to start. In this case, we get to drive with the test. We know that we're going to have a GIF post model and that it has a piece of behavior that extracts the GIF out of the post body. So we can write a test specifically for this. So we're going to create the model and write the test to make sure that that gets extracted out. With no code, that fails. That's good. All right, so we go ahead and create the model and the function. This is actually a computed property. And for those that don't know what a computed property, it's a that. It's a one of that. It's a function that just assigns itself as a property on the object. And then we make the unit test pass. And from that point, we can turn the static content into dynamic content in the Handlebars template. So now we're leaning on that model to store that data for the character count and extracting the GIF link from the post body. And then we can actually delete all of that goofy functionality from the legacy code. So we're liberating some code from the code jail by killing it. Okay, so, but this should actually get the older acceptance tests up and running. And it is the coolest feeling, y'all, when you delete a bunch of old code and you do a refactor like this and you click the button and your tests run and they pass. Like, oh my gosh, like there's so much stuff that you did not do just there when you have a good test suite. All right, so here now we're letting the framework start to carry some of this load. Like, we don't want to carry our own matched luggage. We can't live without it. So this is what I mean by leaning on the framework. The models hold onto our data, keep it up to date, and bind the changes to the DOM automatically. And we're going to lean a little harder because now it's time to identify states in the app. That's step 4. So this is actually a pretty fun part. It's pretty simple. You go back through the app and actually kind of pick out what those states are. All right, so we have this sort of initial state that things are in. The button's visible. The button goes away during editing state, and the thing is ready to save. While the data is in flight, we just want to disable the post button but leave everything else the same. And on an error state, we want to leave the text intact and display a message. And on success, we want to display a message and hide the form. And then after 5 seconds or so, we want to do a form reset back to the initial state, which is exactly what we were doing before. But now we're actually defining it and specifying it. All right, so the component starts in initial state. We bind that state to a class. That class name bindings is how Ember does that. And we'll use that later to manage show and hide with just CSS instead of jQuery. All right, so we want the DOM to just be a representation of state for the app. Now, instead of managing the DOM with jQuery, we're actually going to just push that state around. So we're like, hey, you go over here, state, and you go over here. And we're getting rid of anything where we're actually touching the DOM directly. These actions kind of form a poor man's state machine, but it'll do for now, for what we're trying to accomplish. All right, step 4 is we've liberated most of the code from code jail. There's a few things hanging out there. The states are in place, and the model is tested. A couple of ugly things are left. So the code jail is not empty. We still have this legacy code that reaches outside of the component into the list to handle the delete function. It deletes kind of in a wonky way here. And just look at this for a second. Just let that soak in. That's good code right there is what that is. Holy cow. Inserting the post is so painful. It's painful to modify. It invites pain for the user. But it's outside the component's job, so what can we do? Well, it's probably time for a second component, for listing the posts. We're really quick detour into Ember Data, and when I say a quick detour, this actually took 20 minutes to do in real time. We'll use Ember Data to manage a global state and store of all these models. That means we need to convert our existing plain Ember object model into Ember Data, which is actually very, very little work. It took us about 20 minutes, and it buys us lots of good things. I like to wire in icy AJAX to Ember Data. Amazingly, fixtures will just continue to work as they did before. And the Ember Data refactors in place, tests are green, we can move on. All right, this is pretty much it. It just handles a delete function that gets rid of that record. So we're actually dealing with the data now instead of pushing stuff in and out of the DOM. And it references a list of posts, and that's it. And then in that second template, we just list those out. Pete kind of had actually a pretty solid example of what Ember Handlebars templates look like. They look like this. It replaces the old server-side markup in this case. And then we sprinkle it in, just like the first one, just in a different spot on that same page. And then we have a second set of tests that pretty much follow the first. We actually have a pretty good pattern set forward now for how to test these components. And they show that these show up just as you expect them to. And we can drive out the delete functionality from there. So now we have two components with totally in separate spaces, but they rely on a shared set of data and state. They're talking to each other. So a create in one place adds to things in the second place. So that's a lot of boilerplate code we didn't have to write. We just trust that the data layer does its job. All right, last thing I'll do, we'll move all of the show hide behavior into CSS animations. What I like to do with that is by creating placeholders for the various states of this thing, because we bound that class, so we know that we're going to push it from initial class to editing and so on. So we'll create those classes as little containers to hold things like CSS animation. So hopefully the CSS here actually kind of tells a story, that it's an initial state, the height is 0, the opacity is 0, but after it's moved out of that state, we actually can see things pop into existence. So it should translate down and into opacity 1. We can do a quick demo here of what the state of this thing is right now. So this is it. And we'll submit an animated GIF. I like to just switch it up just to throw people off. That's not one. And our character count is doing what it says it does. And we'll post that one. Oh, got some CSS bug. La, 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 la. This is from Liz. Thank you, Liz. I think this is wonderful. And this one's pretty sweet. This kid is really cool at parallel parking. Sorry, I will do this all day if you guys don't stop me. This one is probably my favorite, so I'll just do this one and then we'll stop. All right, just that one. Okay. Well, if we've got time for more, we've got just a few minutes left. So, but our tests can actually relax about testing that DOM directly if we want. They can continue to test it integration style, but they don't necessarily need to test the DOM because the framework is managing that for us. And now we can actually focus on application logic and integration tests only if we want to. So let's see what we've done so far. See if you can find the business logic in here. If you can, actually that's probably in the DSM-5 So you have diagnosable jQuery disease. So I'm actually introducing 512-bit JQCS encryption. It actually encrypts your business logic in hundreds of lines of jQuery, so no hacker that reads your source could ever figure out how your business actually makes money. There's one, the small downside is your other developers can't figure it out either, but, a small price to pay for security. All right, that's cloud engineering, folks. That's what I get paid the big bucks for. So that turns out not to be such a hot idea for most of us. We moved that encrypted logic to computed properties, states, and models. So your business logic is actually front and center. So somebody could jump in here and see how to edit this, to add more states, to add more functionality, to handle different actions. So we've gone from a sack of hot garbage to a tested and documented, pretty reliable implementation. It's not perfect, but it sort of begs now to be extended and reused. So what happens now is kind of up to you. You can keep extending this with more and more components, and we built applications that way. If you want, right now, actually, if you want to create a full single-page application, that's just a couple of steps away. If you want the benefits of Ember's router and a lot of other cool stuff that Ember will do for you, if you just embrace it like the cult that it is. I love Leader. So we did all this work, and my brain is super tired. And now I've kind of forgotten why I did any of it or why I became a programmer in the first place. And then your boss comes by and she's like, oh yeah, we had a job to do. A job that we were just about to quit right before we IPO'd. That would have been embarrassing. All our friends driving up in Ferraris. So we didn't quit because we love our users. We love our coworkers, and we want them to have cool, nice stuff. And we want to love our job. The software development is supposed to be fun. I keep harping on this because I really believe it. It can be very frustrating, but we're pretty lucky to work in this industry, and it should not give you night sweats. That does mean that we are doing something wrong if we're in that situation. So let's try this again against our new and improved code base. Once we know the API, it's a pretty small test to verify that adding this functionality will do what we want. This test is a little hand-wavy because it passed for the wrong reasons, and I didn't have time to fix it before finishing the talk. But it would be something very similar to this, probably with stubbing out the save action. And then we create a model that just defines what a favorite is. We add the dynamic content to the handlebars, and we write a toggle fave action to destroy or create a favorite. And that's pretty much it. So I'll show you that really fast. All right. Yes. All right. Now we're going to do a full page refresh. All right. So now, live demo. I'm in the wrong branch. Okay. Well, live demo abort. Hi, everybody. It's my first day. Hurry. All right. So actually, we have just a minute left. So adding that functionality for the favoriting was actually pretty fun, and I didn't have time to show it to you, and that's a bummer. But we can actually do a lot with that now that we have it. We've added that favorite functionality. It's extended. We can add more filters to that. We can add popular posts. We can add sharing. This thing is actually extensible, and it's something that you can actually work in now. With my last minute and my last breath before I die, I want to tell you guys my MountainWest story really fast. This is my 4th year at MountainWest. My first year, I was a brand new developer. I'd never really built anything before, and it was really intimidating. And I didn't really know too many people at all, maybe just 1 or 2 people, and it was pretty scary for me. I went to a hack night that night, and I walked into the door, and I didn't know anybody, and everybody seemed so smart and so intimidating and so for real programmer, and I so was not. They actually ran out of the hotel room where they were having the hack night, and I cried and drove home and was really sad. And this is a long time ago now. It feels very distant, but I just want everybody here to know that the community here picked me up, dusted me off, and made me feel like I could just join in and participate. And I hope that's how you guys feel as well. These are my friends. These are my people. And I want to hug every dev. I want you guys to please introduce yourself and ask me to actually demo the functioning fave feature. I'm told I'm pretty good at hugs. And I just want to say thank you guys so much.